different and the same. Do we ever change? Oh, yeah.
Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Diversity. I'm so excited for today's talk. Miriam Ghana is going to be introducing the topic. So join me. Let's have fun and learn at the same time. Let's go, girls, ladies.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Lucy, and welcome everyone to today's live program. We are so excited to have you all here. We've been talking to our youth panel, and they raised a very interesting topic, which we felt was necessary to talk about. We know that there are many people who have knowledge on what mental health is, mental illness, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that there may be others who do not know what all this is about. So on the Diversity Show, we have decided to focus on mental awareness. And we know that it's a very huge topic. We cannot exhaust everything in one session. So we're going to just start building the base, and then gradually we dive into detailed subjects.
Mhm.
So today, we just want to welcome you on board, and we hope that you'll be able to pick something along the way and you will be educated. And for those of you who already know something, you'll be reminded of what you already know. So I think we are all excited, and we are also open for comments and input. So if you have anything you want to share, you can just leave it on the comment page, and we will read as much as we are able to in our next session. So I think that I would leave it to Mabel to introduce.
Yeah. So, well, you've really summed up everything. Really like passionate about this issue, this topic, and it's so bold of our youth to actually bring up this topic. It's very, very, very bold of them. So we have George Ofori, who is going to talk to us about mental health, the topic. So, yep, let's introduce our guest. Let's introduce our guest.
Yes,
George,
there
are
we
you
are.
ready? Yes.
I am ready. My lighting is now top notch, so
Oh,
I
we
am
can see
ready.
you.
And if oh, good, excellent, excellent. And if the connection should be bad, I have a backup Wi-Fi, so we're
Great.
good. We're good. This is going to be really, really good. I'm
Mhm.
really, really excited to.
Interesting.
Ish.
Yeah, yeah. It's so great to
I'm really, really excited to talk about this. And thank you. This is actually the first time I'll be speaking about this in English. I just realized that. So a bunch of the terms and stuff that maybe I normally touch into in Norwegian is there's been this like slight translation process, but hopefully the content is still available to everybody. So this will be good.
Yep, we are ready for you. We're ready.
Yes. Okay. Ready. Okay. Perfect. Let's see here. I'm going to. Uh, let's I might have to receive a permission from you guys to be able to share my screen. Oh, there it is. No, found it. Fantastic. Let's see. Share screen. Share. Okay. Excellent. I hope. Yeah. Does it look okay? Everyone can see the screen. I see nodding.
Yes,
Angela, thank you.
yes,
Okay.
yes, we can see it.
Excellent. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending a bit of your Saturday to talk about something that is, as Mabel touched into, very vulnerable. Mental health is something that I think a lot of people consider to be a very personal a very personal sort of process. And in a sense, it is because you do become very vulnerable, especially when your mental health is, at risk of being threatened, or whether it's not where it used to be. So it's definitely something that can make you feel that perhaps you aren't really where you wish to be. But all the more so, the beautiful chance that it is to be able to talk about it, because one of the truths that we are going to uncover is that everyone has mental health, and everyone has a mental health process as well, where you use these cognitive and these mental factors to be able to navigate our day. Mental health is something that it's kind of like a muscle that needs to be worked on, and it needs to be tended to, and it needs to be, or I wouldn't actually say muscle. Think of it much more of maybe as a garden. So I'm much more of like of a plant person. I love plants. So imagine that your mental health is, this lovely luscious green plants that you have, and if you're going to keep them healthy, keep them growing, and keep them blooming, you're going to have to water it, you're going to have to do some weeding, some pruning, you're going to have to give it some fertilizer as well, and give it nutrients to be able to grow. So I think for today's session, in a sense, there's a lot to get into also as introduced. So I'm going to try to keep it relatively general, but focus quite a substantial portion of it on the role of mental health and the role of the cultural influence, especially on mental health in the African community in Norway. So we're going to start with the big, and then we get more and more down to the small and to the specific. So stay with me. This is going to be really, really good. And I've also done some drawings and stuff over here. So yeah, that's how it is. Let's go. Um,
Yeah.
excellent. All right. So it's all actually began, or my presentation here begins with Monday. So on Monday, I was speaking to a family friend of ours who is studying. She's in her first year of medicine as I learned today, and she was reading this article about the mental health state of a lot of Black adolescents in New York. So this is an American paper, an article about them. And it was published in PubMed, so it's legit, by DuPont and her colleagues. This is a very recent article as well, so that's what kind of makes it so poignant for us. The article is entitled "Adolescent Views of Mental Illness, Stigma, and Intersectional Lens." So there's a lot of stuff to be able to dig into here, but the main um, the main point of interest for me in this article was actually this following line down here. In main effects, or the main effects models, I will sort of explain it later, but in the main effect models, boys and the Latino or Latina parts of the population that were sort of tested for this experiment reported greater stigma. So stigma is a word that we are really going to get into today. And the stigma surrounding mental health, surrounding mental illness or mental disorders, and sort of how you express these. So we are going to get into actually a ton of a ton of concepts today. So I'm going to keep the explanations quite on brand. But stigma refers to this sort of social almost avoidance in a way. So when there's something is stigmatic, it's something that you feel uncomfortable either doing or sharing or partaking in. It feels like it is kind of breaking a norm or breaking a sort of social value. It doesn't actually have to be something that is illegal or something that you don't want to do, but it just feels like a barrier, basically. So in this paper, what they have found out is that in asking a very wide variety of adolescents, youth, ungdommer, if you have the Norwegian variety, asking them more or less how they feel about mental illness, if they feel that they can talk to someone, if they aren't, performing sort of optimally in terms of their mental health. And most of them, and especially most of the boys, and most of the black boys who were part of this population that were asked, they reported that they didn't really feel comfortable talking about mental illness, and certainly not comfortable talking about it when it indicated that their mental health was poor, or it was sort of lacking. And so then you have a bit of a chicken and egg question here. Do they not really want to talk about mental illness because they have been sort of brought up to not want to talk about it, or or is their mental illness a result of them not talking about it? So which way does it really start? So I think if I'm going to try to understand why the situation is like this in an article from 2019, then we have to understand some relatively broad concepts about what mental health is, and maybe more importantly, what mental health isn't, because it's a very misunderstood concept. And when culture, religion, tradition comes into play, it becomes even more and more murky. And it really does give an insight as to why, much like what DuPont and her colleagues found, why maybe black boys, black girls, black youth don't really want to talk about their mental health states. They don't really want to grasp for help when things aren't going their way. And maybe most importantly, they don't really feel that when they do ask for help, that they receive adequate help back. And so again, it's a system that, if we want to understand one part of it, we are going to kind of have to understand how a whole mechanism works. It's a bit of a factory, this, so let's try and get into it. So it started with my reading on Monday. It got me intrigued because I was thinking, okay, how am I going to start talking about this thing today? And then I read this article, and then it makes me realize just the sheer scope. This is an American article, right? But we are talking about the African community in Norway, which in itself is a community that maybe hasn't really had a lot of inner investigation when it comes to research, or the research fields in Norway or in Scandinavia or in the West. And so whenever you have these populations that haven't really been looked at so much, then it's much more interesting, because you're kind of going, okay, is there anything that is making these people seem different than others? What is it about the African community in Norway? Well, what is it about us? Let's keep going. In general, public or the Institute of Public Health in Norway, or what we call FHI, or Folkehelseinstituttet in Norway, is this state-funded, state-run organization looking at both the physical health and the mental health of all Norwegians, right? And I kind of wanted to look at how the prevalence of mental health issues in Norway today. I don't have today's numbers, but I do have numbers from 2018. And the conclusion after a very big and broad report is that about 1/3 of adults in Norway today, in the course of a year, have suffered or do currently suffer from a mental disorder. That's a lot of people. That's millions of people. The same In the same population, 8% of youth, that is, children, teenagers, anyone essentially under 18 years of age, 8% at any given time, this is in a fixed state, any given time, also suffer from mental disorders. What the report then goes on to say is that the most common prevalence of mental disorders in Norway, in youth and also in adults, is anxiety or anxiety disorders, which is something that we'll get more and more into, followed then quite closely by depression or mood disorders, right? So there isn't really too much that is separating Norway from other Western countries or other countries in Europe, in the Americas, in terms of the prevalence of mental health. So we are on a relatively stable line with many other countries, but it's still a lot of people, isn't it? It's still a pretty big percentage, and so if we're going to try to understand the African community and the mental health that maybe we speak about with us, we have to understand on a national level, where are we? So keep in mind these numbers: one third of adults, 8% of youth. This is what we are dealing with more or less today. And also the situation goes on to say, in a sort of broad summary of that same report, that mental disorders and substance abuse, that is the abuse of alcohol, drugs, tobacco, is very widespread in the Norwegian population. And it's the main consequence amongst the many consequences, the main maybe negative consequences, that it is a very sort of socio-economical loss. There's a lot of money that goes to trying to treat a lot of these disorders, trying to keep a lot or trying to keep many Norwegians more or less afloat in their daily lives, in their work. So this is a very serious thing. It's a very big thing that we are looking at. The report also then goes on to conclude finally that there are many behavioral disorders and mood disorders when it comes to the youth. And as mentioned earlier, mood disorders can also be depression or different others that we'll also get into. And the one of the most serious and most fatal outcomes of prolonged mental health disorders and prolonged mental health problems, especially in Norway, is suicide, which really does, it's a devastating loss of life, a devastating way to lose someone that you care about. And also on a national level, it really eats away at the amount of years lived, of the average Norwegian. So these are all situations that really impact on the individual level and also on the social level in Norway. So then, as I said, we are talking about culture, the role of culture in mental health. We're also talking about relatively specific communities in Norway, maybe communities that aren't really mentioned too often. And therefore, we are going to look more and more specific into that. What we do know so far is that there are relatively widespread mental health issues that still pertain in Norway today. And this is no different when it comes to the different nationalities or the different ethnic nationalities and ethnic minorities that we have in Norway. But I regress because I began talking about this article I was reading and I didn't even introduce myself. So my name is George K Ofori. I'm 28 years old. I'm still struggling to believe that. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from NTNU in Trondheim, and I have a master's degree in psychology from UiT in Tromsø. My job experience has been relatively varied, but more or less within the psychological field. I've worked as a teacher, as an assistant for research, as a seminar leader whilst I was studying in Tromsø. And now, on my day-to-day basis, I work as a pedagogic advisor and recruiter for a mentor Norge, which is Mentor is a company that offers tutoring and private teaching to students, helping them with their academic and social challenges in class. And what do I do? Very good question, George, to myself. My main job is to help people. So um, I analyze and I counsel both our tutors, or we call them our mentors, in how they can teach their students in the best possible manner. I teach myself also in a variety of subjects. And the main job there is to sort of support and be able to understand which problems and which obstacles that people have when learning, when in school and trying to attain knowledge. What are the obstacles? How can we then come in here and provide a very tailored learning experience, because one of the rights that all children and all youth and all students, learners have in life today, is that they have the right to have a tailored learning experience, and a learning experience that is made for you. And so that is a huge part of my job. And I also do like to read a lot on different subjects that concern minorities and concern the minority experience, especially in Norway, and how using all these different ideas, this different knowledge from the psychological field, how we can use that to better our situation, both for ourselves but also for future members of the country, of course. So that was quickly about me. That's the boring part. Let's go into the fun part. Culture is something that is really, really fun, and definitely something that more or less surrounds us on a day-to-day basis. The relatively long definition of culture, I tried to define culture for myself earlier today, and impossible. So culture is the systematic understanding of human behavior across social, ethnic, and interest or value-based activities. So the things that we have in common, that is what becomes our culture. The norms that we perform in society, the activities that we have. Our culture is very enriched by what we have in common, but also what sort of separates us from each other. Cultural impact is evident in everything that we do, in the policies that the governments partake in and also decide for us, in the way we spend money, the way we save money, the way we make money. In the arts, if you go to a museum, you would see that, maybe for that particular exhibition, there's one specific kind of painting, one specific kind of sculpture. All that is a certain cultural take on art form. And sports, the fact that maybe different countries like and adore and partake in different sports, also very culturally based. And also in academia, and that's actually a very important point for today's talk. There is a serious lack of representation when it comes to academia. So the professors, the researchers who are based also in this part of the world, because we are more or less in the West. I would assume that for almost everyone listening, but we are in the West, and living here, there are, of course, many rules, many cultural norms that we have to adapt to. But also, there are things that um, the majority culture here has to learn about us and also has to adapt the other way. And there's a huge disconnect very often when it comes to those who are researching and finding out more about people who live here. And if you want to find out about everybody who lives here, then you also need a diverse representation of those who are doing the research, those who are doing the finding out. And the reason why it's so important is that when we then go on to experience challenges that are unique to our demographic or that are unique to the way we are brought up and the way we then live our lives, if you don't have someone who understands you on the other side of the nav table, on the other side of the psychologist bench, on the other side of the nurse's counter, it becomes so much more difficult to get the help that you need. And the reason why a lot of us do then stay in the system and contribute to the system is because we also trust that the system will help us when things are difficult. So there, a bit of maybe a personal wish is that we need more people doing the research, more people doing the teaching, and more or less more people also doing the counseling, the healing, the prevention part. That is really, really important. But I kind of digress. We are talking about culture and health, and the way we perceive good health or bad health or illness across cultures is also very different. which is also another huge point to make here. Uh, what maybe one can find to be good health in one part of the world is maybe seen as relatively poor in another part. There weren't too many, I want to say almost centuries ago, but maybe it's even just decades, where in Oriental cultures, that is, in the cultures further to the east, in and around Asia, having humans who were heavier in weight, it signified that they were wealthy, that they were, well-to-do individuals, and therefore it was something that you would aspire to do, you aspire to be, and you aspire to do that because the others around you perceived that as something that was worthy of being. But if you dial it back to the Western culture, we have different indexes and different ways of looking at people's weight and looking at people's physical health, and therefore it becomes a very different thing. So culture definitely has a huge role to play in the way we perceive what is good health and bad health. Also, it has a huge impact on the way health services meet ethnic minorities. So again, as I mentioned earlier, if you were to enter a psychologist's treatment room, and you are speaking to the psychologist about any of the trauma that you may have from any racial abuse or racial discrimination, and the psychologist has absolutely no idea what it feels like to be in that situation, there's really only so much that person can do. It will definitely be to the best of their abilities. Yes, they are still professionals, but they wouldn't be able to culturally fully understand the scope of your issue. Understand? So how health services would then perceive your problems is a very different thing, and it's also very culturally dependent. And another thing that has really come about in the in the pandemic, especially, and I remember this in the first 2 weeks of the first lockdown that we had in March here in Norway, a huge worry then began to spread. The people in Norway who don't speak Norwegian, are they getting the necessary public health information? Is it being translated to them? Is it being interpreted to them in a good and meaningful way? And very often it wasn't enough. You understand? So then you get the relatively unfortunate consequence that when the pandemic begins to roll, and more and more people have the luxury of being able to stay home, but then you have maybe those who work minimum wage but essential social jobs, the bus drivers, the nurses, the taxi drivers, the vact, all of these people have to work, they have to keep society going. And maybe many of them haven't even received the full scope of information that is needed to know how to keep yourself safe. So then you have to ask yourself, this public health information that we are giving to others, wash your hands, keep your distance, are these things that all of Norway is getting? And are they also understanding exactly what they need to do? All important parts of the cultural influence on the way we take care of ourselves. And then, of course, there's youth, and then there's culture, and then there's social perception. So this is what I was mentioning earlier. These kids in New York who maybe didn't want to go to a psychologist, they didn't want to talk to their friends or their family about their poor mental health because it just isn't cool enough, you understand? Or it just isn't something that you feel that your friends want to hear about. You don't want to be a burden. It's not socially perceived as something that is accepted. And therefore, you don't speak and you keep it in. And as we all know, mental health is a continuum. It is not a fixed state. So every day, as you are moving, as you are developing, so is your mental health. If you are doing the things to nourish your mental health so that you stay healthy and you stay on the move, then you are flourishing, you are growing. But if you aren't doing those things, and even if you are doing things that would diminish your mental health, or that will hurt or harm it, then it gets progressively worse. Understand? So it's a really important part to remember that your mental health state is not a fixed state. It's something that moves on a continuum and something that develops as you go. Um, culture in general. And then you have Norway, where we are, our lovely country, land of the fjords. The cultural influence on mental health in Norway is something relatively unique because there is not a lot of research about it. If there's anyone listening and you are wondering, "Ah, what should I write about on my thesis?" This is what you should write about on your thesis. Hugely, hugely important. My big sis Vera wrote a really, really lovely master thesis on social identity. Also, when it comes to the dyad of being a Norwegian Ghanaian, and she had some really in-depth interviews with many of the Ghanaians who shared a relatively similar upbringing and therefore a similar path into the Norwegian society. We need more of those because that is where the work is. That is where the knowledge is. So again, if you are listening, you know what to do. It would be unfair to speak about the cultural influence on mental health in Norway today if we don't mention the effect of the coronavirus. Um, the the physical effects of the virus very, very well known. There is no doubt about it. But it has a huge mental baggage and a huge mental sort of aftertaste that I don't think too many people are prepared for yet. And I really hope that it doesn't manifest itself in too bad of a way when the pandemic is more or less over. But already, right now, there are huge, huge numbers being reported of especially young people in Norway today reporting more and more loneliness. The students are in different cities without friends, without family. They can't move around too much. They're in a small hubel, and it's something that, of course, has an effect on your mental health state. So feeling lonely, feeling isolated from everything that you hold dear, it's definitely something that would affect you. There are those who fear being sick and going around with that constant fear of illness. There are various what should I even say? There are various research projects looking at the effects or the influence of mental health on physical health, and of course, there's a link there. What you think becomes what you become. So if you have this fear of illness, you have elevated stress levels in your body. These elevated stress levels, they then influence your immune system, and if your immune system is compromised, then you are much more susceptible to being ill. So this is just one of many ways where your mental health definitely will go on to affect your physical health. There is no secret as well that the virus has done a number on the different economical situations that we have in Norway today. Many people are still on furlough leave, and they've or permittert, as you say in Norwegian. Many have lost their jobs, and many are therefore struggling to make ends meet. Many more people are now on dagpenger, this sort of daily social payment arranged from NAV. And all of this is a situation that doesn't exactly bring security. Understand? It doesn't give you this sense of well-being. It doesn't give you this sense of optimism for the future. Because you are now, maybe at first you were thinking 5-year plan, 10-year plan, but now you are thinking next week. You are thinking next month. Will I be able to pay my rent next month? Will I be able to afford this? This and this and this vital stuff. So all of these things, which are very natural effects of a virus that causes huge economical situations. These are all consequences that have to be taken into account, and they all as well they influence our mental health, definitely. And then there's the cultural impact of the mental health itself in Norway. um I don't think it will be possible to speak today without mentioning maybe a lot of the myths that persist around mental health, especially myths that stem from or that circulate in cultural minorities in Norway today. Religion is definitely something that I think um, very often meets psychology or meets mental health in a way that I don't think mental health or religion is intended to be understood, right? So I think a lot of tradition and religion meets our day-to-day well-being in a way where we feel obligated to feel or think a certain way. The element of being grateful, for example, grateful that one is alive, that one has what one needs. Um, this is something that is relatively low on our mental hierarchy, right? So we are grateful to be alive, we are grateful to have our basic necessities. And maybe, therefore, because we believe that we should be grateful, then we suppress our other needs, we suppress our other thoughts. And again, suppressing negative emotions, suppressing negative thoughts, whilst very, very easy to do, because I think everyone does it at, from time to time, it's definitely something that really, really influences, as I also mentioned earlier, this continuous mental health that we have. It's not a fixed state, it's still moving. Social media and the culture of openness. So now we are exposed to many more people and to many more situations, um, just by the click of an app, or by the swipe of anything on your phone. You are introduced to more or less the folded out mental world of friends, of strangers, of loved ones. And the openness is important, and I think it's something that also has to be supported. But then you also have to be really good at setting your own boundaries online. You have to know more or less when your own mental health is being more or less influenced by seeing others speak on theirs. Because again, mental health isn't a fixed state, and it is also certainly not something that we can say, okay, I will not be influenced by this. The mind works in ways where it is trying to navigate, and it is trying to simplify our daily lives. And sometimes it takes decisions that we subconsciously aren't even aware of. And before you know it, you are thinking, or you are in a mental headspace that you weren't even prepared for. So I think being able to set some boundaries for ourselves also when meeting the social media openness that normally is really important. um and then, of course, there's migration. The African community in Norway especially have come here for different reasons and in different ways. And I think that's a really important thing to have in mind, is that um, some of the ways that one may have used to come here could be very traumatic. It could be something that really, really has has an impact on the way we lead our lives. And then turning over to the way our mental health keeps us going or keeps us in check, we should be able to look at it as a very valid way of saying, how are you feeling? What I mean is that when I do ask you the question, how are you today? The fact that you aren't ill, or the fact that you aren't injured, isn't really enough to be just fine, you know. Because if you are physically fine, but mentally, you are struggling, then you should be able to say that you aren't doing well, you know, and you should be able to more or less in a sort of like a side by side fashion, you should be able to say, oh, I'm feeling quite all right, but I'm not doing quite well mentally. And therefore, because I'm not doing well mentally, I'm not, I'm not just fine. And I think that is sort of where this vulnerability that I mentioned in the start comes in, because it's truly putting yourself on the line, but you are also then giving yourself, if you wish, of course, the chance to navigate that as well. But shutting it off and saying that, well, I'm not ill, so therefore I should be fine. Yeah, we should be many things, but again, the mind and our subconscious mind works in ways that aren't really accessible to us sometimes. So we have to be good at listening to ourselves, and we have to be good at validating our mental health also when it is working independent of our physical health. Yeah, that was the point. Okay, there we go. I lost myself a bit there, but yeah, I found it back. Thank you. Um, yeah, stigma in the youth. Yeah, and then also with the social media and the culture of openness, um, which is really sort of trending a lot lately. The notion of stigma is also something that really needs to be addressed. Stigma is something that normally would stop any conversation about mental health, because one will feel that they aren't strong enough to be able to deal with the problem themselves, and therefore it will be perceived as weakness if they were to ask for help. And all of these things, as we will look in this sort of mini guide that I've made for us very soon, all of these things are things that we have to reconsider when we are talking about this in the times ahead. Let's see. And psychology as a field is really important to be able to back uh, a lot of the claims with science and with research. And research has many forms. You have self-reporting, where you are more or less asking participants to answer questions about their own mental health. The advantage there is that you get many answers and it's very accessible, very easy to perform. The disadvantage is that you have this thing called social desirability, where maybe people want to be perceived as better than they are or healthier than they are. So you aren't really sure whether you are getting the full scope of answers, but you have to hope. You have to hope that people are being honest as well when they are giving you these answers. Reports are being written, observations are being made. So there's a lot of research that happens in the psychological field, but especially on this topic, there can always be more. And what has been done already is already giving us some answers. So there is I've just picked some select articles and select bits from a lot of Norwegian literature, Norwegian reports. One report in the Nurses online journal, I believe it was from 2009. This one says that the fear of gossip and rumors is a relatively known phenomenon, especially in minority environments where this can be very normal. So many people don't want to speak about their mental health because they fear, there will be some chitter chatter, some talking within, the community, within the African community or the South Asian community. They fear that people would go around saying, oh, have you seen this girl? She's, apparently she's going to a psychologist, and it is perceived as something threatening when these rumors and stuff are going around. And therefore, people don't really reach out for help, which is something that also needs to be addressed. Why is this happening? What will others say of me? Which is a thought that maybe some people might relate to before going to a psychologist. This one here from forthebegin.no says that there are a bunch of different risk factors in the minority population. Poverty, loneliness, a lot of moving around. If you come to Norway as either an immigrant or especially as a refugee, you're normally placed in very remote places in Norway at first, and then you get moved around. Maybe if you're unlucky, you get moved around a lot, and all of this moving stuff that definitely affects you physically, but also mentally. Um, and this one here, which I've underlined over here, is a really, really important part: the lack of social support. You understand? So you are leaving your country, you are leaving everything that you've known, you are leaving your friends, your family, your neighbors, your schoolmates, and you've come to a completely different country where people are speaking a different language. The climate is different. And most importantly, those who maybe you can go to for comfort aren't there. So definitely that also would affect our mental health. And the report also shows that people with, especially those with a refugee background, are way more susceptible to receiving mental problems. You know, so I think that is also a huge part of it. Um, and those who have experienced very traumatic backgrounds, um, nice reminder, thank you. Traumatic backgrounds also really important, that there are people who are now coming in with um, they're coming in with a mental state that is not stable, you know. And then, all you listeners, this is probably something that I would say is the most prevalent in Norway today. What they call krispes when it comes to identity, finding out who you are, right? So back home you are one person, here you are another person, and then the questions begin. Where is home? Where am I most accepted? Who am I in these different places? And yeah, who am I in this culture and in both cultures? And I think especially for the younger people and for the adolescents, this is a very difficult thing to navigate, because your parents can't give you the answers in a full way, because they know one culture and they are also learning another culture. So essentially, your navigation has to do with those who maybe are part in the majority population in Norway, which would be ethnic Norwegians, right? So then with them, you are trying to figure out who you are. And maybe for the most part, many people, I believe it was the Girls in Africa Collective who had this very sort of informal research where they asked especially a lot of the young people in Norway who have these dual cultural backgrounds. They ask them, when or how did you feel the first time you were sort of reminded, or for the first time you had to realize that you weren't the same as most Norwegians, because for most people, maybe there's this light bulb moment, or there's this incident where they kind of go, oh, right, my hair is different, the color of my skin is different, the way I speak is different, the food I eat is different. And I think trying to navigate that, as well as trying to be a good integrated Norwegian, also, it would be a loss to not consider the effect that could also have on our mental health. So these are also things that we have to consider. These risk factors, they are there, and they are quite prevalent as well. um let's see. Oh, I think I actually skipped something. No, I did not. Fantastic. So, I have made a very informal, quick guide to the African community, and this is to the community when it comes to treating matters that have to do with mental health, because there we can grow, and most importantly, we can grow together. And there's a lot of science behind um, how we can look at different concepts and how we can speak to each other to be able to grow. So I made a bit of a list here. Let's see. And I think it's always good to start with what mental health isn't, right? So this is a list of myths and a list of things that I think is really important to challenge in our daily lives. Mental health is not madness. It is not being possessed, or having the presence of a benevolent spiritual force, present. You aren't mad if you are ill. There should be no shame attached to it, and it's definitely not weakness. Being able to confront the inner workings of your psyche, your emotions, and then also coming out to people and saying, I need help. That is a show of strength that very few things in life can match. Mental health is not a matter of giving up when it's not going well. It's not a matter of being told, listen, you just have to keep on going and you'll be fine. You need help. you need support. It's not a trend. I put that in there, and it was a bit sort of I felt I was a bit edgy, controversial to put it in there, but it's not something that is or should be treated as trendy or cool to be low on on your mental health. It's really, really important because our mind works in ways where if we feed our mind routines and habits and ways of thinking for long enough, it begins to think like that by itself. And that's actually a really, really important thing to remember. That is the reason why it's very possible to be addicted to substances. Also, very possible to be addicted to things like sugar, because what the mind begins to find comfort in, the different hormones that are then secreted in different parts of the mind, will also give your mind this feeling of reward. And as humans, we are wired to chase reward. So if we find it rewarding to believe or to act in manners where our mental health is, at risk, then we continue to do so. I also wrote a cool backstory here. Mental health is and probably shouldn't be um, like this. What should I even say? It shouldn't be this point of a comeback, you understand, where we idolize being mentally unhealthy and putting oneself in that situation to be able to get this grandiose heroic comeback story. Again, it shouldn't be a trend, and it's not something to play with, and it's definitely not something that we have to disregard. And when someone then reaches out and says that they need help concerning their mental health, it has to be met with respect. It has to be met with compassion. And in fact, sorry, I'm spoiling myself because now we are going to then talk about what mental health is. And this is really, 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 really important because this is what I believe today's message from me definitely should be. Mental health, and especially poor mental health, is pathology. It's an illness. You have different disorders such as mood disorders, which I mentioned before, like depression, bipolar disorder. You have anxiety disorders, which is probably what is most prevalent with a lot of people today in this country. You have schizophrenia, you have different personality disorders, you have eating and sleeping disorders. So all of these disorders and all of these ways of not working optimally are all part of what our mental health state is. um, it is self-preservation. It is taking care of yourself. It is being able to take care of your cognitive, your emotional functioning, being able to regulate how you feel. If you find yourself crying for no reason and you can't stop, you can't regulate your emotion, it's a sign that there is something in your mechanism that isn't working as it should. If you can't react in an appropriate manner with your emotions to something happening, someone surprises you, then you become either super angry or super sad. Or, of course, it's not these like day by day things, but when it's a pattern, when you really struggle to control your emotions like that, it's something that you really have to look into, and you have to care for yourself because, again, as I mentioned, and I keep on repeating this, it's not a fixed state. It's something that develops over time. But that also means that taking care of yourself and being able to reach out for help when needed is also something that can help you feel better over time. And whilst those who have these clinical depressions and relatively heavy parts of disorders, it's difficult to fully treat, but it's really, really possible to manage. And you definitely have all these tools you can use to keep yourself in check and to keep yourself afloat, because life is actually, yeah, my next point. Yes, sorry, before I get to that, it is mental health is an awareness of your biases. It's an awareness of your dissonance. In other words, it's being aware that you can have an opinion about this thing, but then you can also have an opinion about that thing. And even though those things disagree, you can still feel both. You can still think both. And having a bias, having an implicit bias, meaning that you have this sort of preference towards one thing or preference to another thing, it's all part of it. It's part of our mental health. And being aware of all of this is really, really important as well. And consciously, mental health is being human, because that is what we are in the day. despite the shades of pigments, our languages, our dialects, our choice of food, essentially it is being human. And being human means that you go through life where you can't predict events, and therefore good things will happen, bad things will also happen. And a huge part of our mental health is being able to prepare ourselves to take care of ourselves when the bad things happen, you know, and to know where we can go to for help, who we can speak with when the bad things happen as well. Um, and if all of this is going to work, finally, in conclusion, if this is going to work for everybody, then we need to create a society, and especially a Norwegian society, that is much more accepting. It's much warmer. I use the Norwegian word raus very often. I really struggle to find an English word for raus. I think, in a way, raus, I suppose, means compassionate, but not just compassionate, but it also means that compassionate whilst seeing the potential in someone else. You are giving someone the chance to be the best that they can be. And to get there, we need to be aware of our biases. We need to be aware of the way we speak to each other, and we need to accept each other, accept the backgrounds that people have, accept the way people think, and accept what they bring to the table. We also need to be open and honest about how we really feel. And especially these days, as I mentioned with the coronavirus and the pandemic, it's really, really important that we are honest about it, because we don't evolve when we suppress our feelings. We don't evolve when we keep things littered in. We proceed in creating an accepting society when we are taken more seriously by healthcare professionals. When meeting a doctor or a nurse or a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor, when meeting them feels as if we can be seen and you can be heard when you ask for help. I don't remember the number, but there's a percentage of people who are suffering with mental health disorders and mental health deficiencies who don't want to ask for help anymore, because the one time they reached out, they were shunned back, or they were put on a waiting list that went on for too long, and it was too late, you know. And that is a tragedy if we as humans see each other as these pawns in a game where we can, place people wherever we want, and then it should be fine. But again, every human is a sentient, conscious being. So that person will have needs, that person has ambitions, that person has necessities. And we should be able to see each other and create space for each other in terms of that. And also, as I mentioned earlier, more representation in health fields, more research on matters that pertain to ethnic minorities, especially in Norway. There is a lot that can be done to understand the minority experience in Norway. And when we can understand it better, then we can also create systems where we can take care of each other in a much, much better manner. So these are just some things. And on a more sort of personal level, maybe seeing the best in each other and being able to give each other the benefit of doubt. If you wonder what that person meant or what that person what their intentions are, giving them the chance to clear it out, I think definitely stops many arguments, stops a lot of the social quarreling that we might have, and being able to take care of ourselves, take some time out. If it's too much, put a break in it, and take care of yourself, take care of your mind, do the things that you like to do that will grow your mind, grow your feeling of comfort. Really, really important. And my last point for everyone today is that practicing good pro-social behavior is probably the most important thing that we can do for each other, in the short term. Being a good friend, a good neighbor, a good boyfriend or girlfriend, a good caregiver, a good teacher, a good parent, a good uncle, auntie, nephew, niece, just being good to each other and seeing the best in each other, I think is a really, really important part in creating a society where we make it natural to also say when your mental health isn't really, top notch. And in culture, and in our cultural background, it's not weakness to be able to say, I'm not feeling well. You know, you aren't losing anything, and you shouldn't feel as if it's a transaction where you are losing your integrity because you aren't feeling well. As I said, everyone has mental health. Life has ups and downs, and everyone feels them. The most important thing is how we can relate to each other when it goes up and also when it goes down. Thank you guys so much for listening. It's been a pleasure to speak to you all.
Yeah.
I hope there are some questions and or comments that would be good to
Yeah.
engage in.
Yeah, let me just say thank you so much for. I mean, I'm a bit overwhelmed with a lot of information and a lot of impactful contents that we've received from you this evening, and let me just add that I know we scheduled the time to 7 o'clock, but please let us steal some few minutes of your time because little Miriam, well, I should call her Miriam S because we have Miriam S and Miriam G. So Miriam S have some few questions for you. But before then, let me just add and say that mental health awareness on Diversity Show, it will come up in various episodes. So this is not the last time you're going to hear of George. And we have other people on the list as well, because this is a topic that we should go in step by step and deal with it. So Miriam S has some few questions for you.
Yes. So the
Oh,
first question is, how can we break the perception some of us have about mental illness or mental health? And how can we create more awareness around this topic?
yes, good. Good questions actually, and relatively difficult questions as well because it involves. So I think that it involves um, the will to help, right? So there has to be on a very basic level, there has to be a willingness to reach out to those who are struggling. I think one huge flaw that we have in society today is that we expect those who are struggling to always be the ones to first reach out for help, right?
Mm.
And in theory, that would make sense because many people, I think, are afraid of giving the wrong advice or the wrong help, and therefore you don't want to make a matter worse. But at the same time, you are putting a lot of the responsibility of the help on the person who maybe doesn't have all the resources in place to ask for the help. So I think the kind of conversations that we have with each other is probably the first step. When speaking to friends, um, it should be possible to normalize speaking about the way we feel mentally. And when we normalize it at the same time, we don't expect that everyone should be able to have all the answers to why you aren't feeling well. But just being able to put words to it, either it's written or whether it is spoken, being able to actually say what you feel out loud, I think it does a lot with yourself, but you also then create the opportunity to get help. So maybe I can't help you when you tell me how you're feeling, but maybe I know someone who can, and maybe I can point in a direction that might be good for you. So I think that the content of our conversation with each other probably has to change, has to come on a lower level.
Mhm.
And in terms of awareness, awareness is just about speaking to those who don't know. I have gone through a relatively long process now since I would say maybe since like June 2020, where I've had many friends who have asked, especially concerning racial discrimination in Norway. Many friends have asked how we can spread awareness, how we can make things, more and more clear. And there, honest conversations as well. let, being being straight and saying, yeah, this is the plight of the black person in Norway today. It's applying for a job and not knowing whether you didn't get the job because you're not qualified or because of your name. It's about applying for to rent somewhere, and it's difficult. And it's just about putting all these realities out there and saying, this is how it is. So where do we go from here? Yeah, we go from here by being active, joining groups that can put pressure on those who are above you in the pay grade, those who are maybe deciding things, being active, and also being clear when you speak. I think that's also a really important thing. So long answer. I hope there were some answers in there somewhere, but definitely the way we speak to each other and the way the intention that we have to be clear, I think is really, really important.
Yes, thank you. So our last question is, as you said, talking to someone is one way to deal with mental illness.
Yeah.
But how should those who listen to the victims deal with this?
Yeah, also really, really important. And I think also really, really important for those of a different cultural background, because again, if you aren't used to it from home, then maybe now trying to accustom yourself to listening to either your children or youth speaking to you about their mental state is probably a very difficult thing. And I have a lot of sympathy with that, because you also have to learn. So I think the most important thing there is to not shut them at the door, welcome them in and let them speak. And let them speak without too many interruptions. Don't try to guide the conversation into a certain part which you think makes sense. You have to let them speak their reality, right? And then after they have sort of gotten everything off their chest, I think it's really, really important to try to see the situation from their angle. Why would they feel like that? What happened? What has put them in this situation? And then go through it piece by piece. Don't take everything in one. Start with the first thing that you said. Speak together. Okay, so this happened and this made you feel like this. Let's talk about that. I think that maybe if we try this next time, it can be different. And just go method, piece by piece, and it would make anyone who is speaking about their mental health just feel heard and feel seen, and already there half the job is done. And then you have to go from there to strengthen that person. Give them the motivation to keep going. Find, if you're going to find a solution with that person, yes, you can offer your solutions, but most importantly, and this is actually something that people do not too often. You have to just believe in them. Say, listen, I believe in you. I believe in the strength that you have to be able to overcome this. I believe that if you want help, you let me know. And I want you to keep going. And I'll support you. You give that reassurance. I'll support you every step of the way. And you are growing, you are learning. So am I. And this is how life is. But I believe in you. And I stand behind you. And let's go through this together. You talk to me with anything, or you talk to whoever you need to talk to, and then you just keep going. And I think the more we just send that belief into each other, the better we can tackle things that are very difficult to tackle alone. If you believe in someone, tell them. If you have a strong feeling that someone can overcome, tell them that and give them that motivation. That's really, really important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your answers. Well, we did. There are some few questions that we have on live.
Yeah.
And to also add to what I said earlier on, we're going to have this session, like we're going to have mental health awareness in various episodes and stuff. So if we don't get to read some of your questions, we'll definitely save them for another time. But before you go, if like let's give you one minute just 1 minute to answer this. There's a question coming from Nakoli Bessa, and he's wondering, do many people actually realize that they have mental issues? I mean, you've gone through the patterns, but yeah.
I think many people are very quick to dismiss it. You know, it's something that comes relatively low on the list because people have this idea that you have to be very ill to have mental issues. But the truth is that if you aren't doing well and you are struggling to pull yourself out of it, or you are struggling to get back to where you used to be, then most probably you are better served at least speaking to someone, because there's a lot of resources in professionals and resources in speaking to people and sharing your burdens. So I think it is important to also know that bad days happen, good days happen, and that the whole experience is life. So I think many more people can be aware of how they feel, and also to share it. There's nothing more beautiful than finding that you and someone bond over a situation, and then maybe you can also help each other about it as well. So whatever is on your mind, whatever is in your heart, it's better to share it. That is the yeah, I think the best end of it.
Oh, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I guess we will say so long to you like now. So then we will definitely get in touch with you again. As I said, this is going to go in various episodes. So there is more coming, and I know that you have a lot to share. So my girls and we're going to round up a little bit. So we just say thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, George, for coming. I learned a lot today.
Yes.
For the next time, I have a lot of questions for you, but I'll keep
okay. Okay. No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Yep, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so girls, what I hope you got something.
I got a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. But we have to round up.
Yeah.
And there are so many people that were watching. Let me see here. Nancy was watching. Bessa was really George is doing a fantastic job. And we have Natasha that said it's a great topic. So yeah, we need to continue. Nancy is saying that we need to have a topic. We need to have more. We need to have more of this topic. So
I agree with them.
Yeah. So
I agree with all of them.
So if none of you have anything else more to add, Madam Miriam S., can you round up for us?
Well, I think this has been really Miriam S.
Sorry, I meant Miriam. Yes, sorry, Miriam S. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, me.
Miriam S.
It has really been a good evening, and George did a really good job about talking about this topic. And as people are saying, we really need to talk more about this topic.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. So I guess we should our viewers should expect more from us, more information. So let's say follow up on our page and watch out for the next session on mental health awareness. So I hope you all have a good evening, and I hope you've really gotten something out of this session. Yes, so that's bye for now.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're different and the same. Do we ever change?